The critical election that the entire country should be paying attention to, because this will determine, believe it or not, the control of the House of Representatives over the next couple of years. And we're going to swing over to that with a great guy over from Libra. We'll be back in a second. Got to pick up the radio crew from the commercial break. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Well, those of you listening on our Wisconsin part of the syndication network might know there's a bit of an election season going on. A Supreme Court seat in the state is up for grabs, and my, are the hands grabbing for it. So to talk a little bit about this issue and why this particular race is so important, the stakes involved, we're thrilled to be joined by Daniel Garza. He's the founder and president of Libre, and of course, we'll link all of that down in the description. Sir, thanks for joining us.
What a pleasure, Tony. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you.
Oh, it's a blast. Let's get right into the stuff here. Tell us why this Supreme Court race is so massive.
Well, for one, obviously, you can tilt the ideological scale of the court, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, and that'll dictate a lot of how decisions are made and how, it tips the balance on many of the, obviously, the thousands of cases that go through the Supreme Court. I don't know, thousands, maybe hundreds. I'm not sure. Point is, it will tilt, the majority of the ideological scale. It also has national implications in the sense that this race is being funded by people across the country, especially for Suzanne Crawford, who's like, I think 80% of the donations are coming from out of state. That's an astronomical number, but it just, obviously goes to show a lot of folks are interested in the outcome of this race. Mm-hmm. And then I would say also that it promises to tilt maybe the scale or the majority of the U.S. Congress. That's because, the candidate, Suzanne Crawford, was caught promoting her intentions to rig the districts using the levers of the judiciary to make it happen.
So when you say like using the judiciary to make districting a specific way in Wisconsin, what do you mean?
Yeah, so there's some emails that went out that were intercepted that showed that she made promises that she was going to be involved in redistricting deliberately and intentionally the congressional districts of the state to flip two of the seats. And as you know, Tony, right now the Republicans are driving a lot of legislation as they hold the majority in the House with a 2-vote majority, which would, of course, flip the majority of the House and entirely change the fortunes of the country because of this one Supreme Court race in Wisconsin.
Right. So accusations of gerrymandering in this particular instance are not just serious on perhaps a state legislature threshold, but could change the entire balance of how Congress and the House of Representatives functions.
Right. And it's not so much an accusation as much as it's fact. I mean, she's the one who put out the email. This is time sensitive. This is what it shows on the email. Chance to put 2 more House seats in play for 2026. And she was raising money off of this promise. So that, already talking about outcomes of a Supreme Court decision or, of a judge is sketchy. I don't know how ethical it is, to be honest with you, and to raise money on it. That, I think, question goes right at her character and her intentions. So it's political as opposed to judicial, and that should concern every Wisconsinite.
Right. And of course, not to mention, it appears that it's really concerning a lot of the rest of the country as well. If, as you described, so much of the money in favor of Susan Crawford's campaign is coming from outside of the state. Now, I've actually seen individuals on the other side going in for the other candidate who I'm familiar with, Scott Pressler, who had done a pretty amazing job, a pretty incredible lift, a power lift of getting people out to vote for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania for the presidential election. Now he's come over to Wisconsin to raise support for the candidate facing off against Crawford. What do we see as far as the opposition in this case to Crawford?
So, Brad Schimel, who is the conservative candidate, the candidate who brings a perspective of original intent, who will honor and uphold the Constitution as written, as intended. He is an alumni of the University of Wisconsin Law, I understand, currently a circuit court judge. I believe he resides in Waukesha County. He used to be a former attorney general of Wisconsin, tough on criminals. He had a pattern and a record of that as a prosecutor as well. He's an adoptive father of two daughters, a family man. He committed to honoring and upholding the original intent of the Constitution. This matters because, of course, if you don't like the way the Constitution is written, then of course that has a process. You appeal to the legislature, the bicameral legislature of Wisconsin, and get them to change it. So, well, that's hard to do. Well, then you don't get to change the Constitution. You have to, of course, make decisions that honor the Constitution and its original intent. Here, Brad Schimel would do that. Susan Crawford, not so much. We know that she is a radical on many current cultural issues. She has a pattern of being lenient with sexual predators. She is also lenient on criminals, really soft sentences. That's been her pattern. And on transgender issues as well, radical left.
Well, I think that when you're looking at a candidate who believes that the Constitution, whether it be the state constitution of the state of Wisconsin or whether it's the United States Constitution, that it's a living document, that it can change, and that perhaps some of the statements and things are more mere suggestions up for interpretation, I can see why it would be rather concerning to the opponents of Susan if a Supreme Court justice just decided to be, what's the colloquial here, a bit willy-nilly with the Constitution.
That's right.
Yeah, that would throw a lot of things into a pretty fair crisis, given the amount of cases that every court around the country is hearing right now. We're at a pretty significant cultural divide in the country.
Tony, the problem with that is that ideological whims come and go. Sentiments of a judge change even in their lifetime. There is no predictability. There is no certainty on the way that they're going to vote, and they get caught in this sort of woke culture, like for example, nowadays. And then in 4 years, when you change a president, the sentiment changes again. Do you then change your position? So no, you need a code. You need a principle to base your decisions on. And the American people have a constitution that was passed by the founding fathers, and you have to respect that original intent. Again, it's kind of like the Second Amendment. I had a conversation once with an ambassador of Spain, and he said he was just shocked by how Americans can possess firearms. Well, so the reason we do that, sir, is because it's in the Constitution. And if you don't like it, you can change it. That's hard to do. Well, then people get to possess guns until you change the Constitution. The point is, you can't go off ideological whims or personal desires of how you want the law to be. It is what it is, and you have to respect it and honor it. And if I were a voter of Wisconsin, I would choose a judge that would stick to the principles of original intent.
I think that that's a really great point to bring up, because when you're looking at the foundational rights of Americans, the Constitution is supposed to be extremely difficult to change at the national level. It's one of the things that gives me heartburn, looking at other states around the country who have instituted these sweeping referendums on their state constitutions to codify mob rule fueled anger issues permanently onto their state constitution, or until the people decide to vote to change it again the next election. And I really would like to see more stability, by which I mean I'd like to see constitutions be changed slowly, if at all, because you're right, if you start tweaking around with the foundation of the building, it's going to weaken the structure. And the Second Amendment does exist to prevent, a tyrannical government. That is its pure pointed purpose. So when we're looking at the Wisconsin Supreme Court, looking at on the ground, how are things looking right now? Does it look like, Schimel or Susan have the edge here? What are you hearing?
Well, depending on the poll that you're looking at, it looks like Susan Crawford right now has the preference of white voters in Wisconsin by about 4 to 5 points. I saw a Newsweek poll that I just actually posted on Twitter, where 89% of blacks in Wisconsin prefer Suzanne Crawford. No blacks are voting for Brad Schimel, according to this poll, which I think is impossible. But there you have it.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
It's a little weird, right? And Latinos in Wisconsin are split 50-50 or 49% to 49%.
And there's a major Hispanic community in Wisconsin. It's one of the leading immigration target states for legal immigrants in this country.
Absolutely, and it's a growing community also of citizen Latinos who are more and more across the country. Also, by the way, beginning to decide the outcomes of a lot of local, state, and federal races. And in this case, the fact that they're split 50-50 in this Newsweek poll, while it shows that no blacks are voting, is remarkable to me, and it shows how much of a swing vote the Latino community is. You can, of course, persuade Latinos based on the merits of what you offer, right? And how you will strengthen America and make sure that, you have a message where all will rise.
Cultural foundations are extremely important to every single one of the Latino communities in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And this may have something to do with the cultural positions of a radical like Suzanne Crawford, where for the longest time, Latinos have been telling the radical left, we're not going to go there with you, wherever you started, because for the longest time, Latinos were not heard, right? They were not, they were on the outside looking in, and the only ones that were listening
kind of a political prop, one might say.
Exactly, a lot of times, and the only one listening to them was the left of center, and so they created this relationship where they won over their vote for the longest time. But at a certain point, the left just kept going and got really radical, and Latino says, "I'm sorry, I'm just not going to go there with you." And they started looking at what's going on here on the right, and so more and more it's been shifting towards the right based on economic issues, cultural issues, but really on how you commit yourself to strengthening America and creating opportunity for all. And you're going to honor American principles, and that starts with upholding the Constitution. If you threaten the Constitution, you shouldn't get our vote.
I think that's the best way to frame this up, and really looking forward to seeing how this shakes out, especially considering how important it is to make sure that when you're looking at the growing community of Latinos who are involved in the political atmosphere, who are very passionate about traditional American culture and making sure that a good system of growth, freedom, the liberties, and rights, many of whom have experiences with, for example, the dictatorships of Cuba or Venezuela, who want that to be kept very far away from the United States. It makes perfect sense why this would be such an important race, given the way. So, unfortunately, with the FCC radio clock cutting us short, got to end it there for now. Daniel Garza, Libre's founder and president, thanks so much for stopping by and giving us a little bit of an inside look here.
A pleasure, brother. Thank you.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.